For Bardege Laibi in Gulu City. Honorable, you're most welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Charles, and thank you, the viewers.
Yes, and all the way from right now, he is in South Sudan. Let me test whether he is already here with us. Professor Philip Kasaija Apuli, he is a Don, a university Don at the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Makerere University in Kampala. Is Professor in? I'm told he's joining us shortly. And Professor, I know that you're listening in. We await your joining shortly. But let me start by asking General from the basics. When Uganda was attacked, or Kampala was attacked by terrorists, and if you were an army commander at the time, last month, what would you have done?
Well, one would have to immediately try to find out where the lapse would have been in terms of intelligence gathering. How an incident like that would have happened without it being detected and neutralized before it happened. I'd like to believe that anybody who would be heading security, that's the first thing they would try to do. And therefore try to start rebuilding so that there is no similar attack that happens any other time.
Okay. Immediately following that, we saw there was a response from government. And I must say that we tried as much as possible to get some of our government officials to come to this show. We were not very successful, but we will try as much as possible to get a feedback, even if it is not for this show. But the whole of yesterday, Monday, and this morning, we were trying to get government officials, including the ministers in charge of security, to come, but we have been unsuccessful. But the show must go on. Government immediately swung into action, and you know, there was a lot of information that was brought forward. And one of those information that has led us to where we are now was that the guys who threw the bombs, the guys who killed our innocent people in Kampala, were terrorists from the ADF. And the ADF, of course, is said to be holed up in eastern DRC, and they had to move there. What's your view about this, can we call it hot pursuit? Is that what you would call it? What is it that it is? And would you do it the same way? What would you do different, perhaps?
Well, I think one significant thing that has happened this time around, which I would like to commend, one, the president of DRC, because he seems to be approaching the different countries that border with the DRC. He's engaged the Ugandan government. From what I hear, he's engaging with the Rwanda government and Burundi. I don't know whether he's engaging with Tanzania as well, because they also have quite a long border along Lake Tanganyika. And as long as he wants to involve the countries along the eastern Congo border to stabilize Congo, I think it is the right approach. Two, this time around that UPDF has gone into Congo, after discussions with DRC, in regard to that, I think it is also a correct move that the entry of UPDF this time around is with the endorsement of the DRC government. I think where there has been an error, though, is internal. It's a domestic problem, and it's been running for a long time. And I am not spending a lot of time on that because I know the mindset or the psychology of the one who deploys the army. Because this argument about Parliament being involved for them to authorize the deployment of UPDF. It's been long-standing because there's been deployment in Central African Republic, deployment in South Sudan, deployment in Somalia, and every time there have been complaints from the public, from the parliament. But General Museveni's mindset, he wants to create an image that he's overall, he can't do anything, he doesn't have to make consultations with institutions, and nothing will happen. It's unfortunate. I'm not so sure whether we're about to see a change of mind in regard to that, because if that happened, then it would contradict the mindset from which he operates. It's unfortunate, of course, because one would expect that if he would be a type of leader that would want to establish a new culture, so that even those who follow find that there are established institutions, there are functioning systems, there is a culture that encourages good governance, then it will be good for the country. The way I look at him, the way he operates, I think it would be miraculous if he changed his ways. Basically, when you're operating from a position of that nature, there are some of the human emotions which guide or lead in the manner in which leaders operate. It's unfortunate that General Museveni operates from that standpoint of arrogance. Of course, arrogance has a cousin of pride. They go together. When you are in power and nothing is, there are no strong institutions to check you, there's a tendency that you'll fall into those two. You can start operating in an arrogant manner. You can start operating with pride. Unfortunately, they always have a cost, in the medium or in the long term. But I think that's not a subject for today. My hope is that Parliament will, hopefully, that's another area, of course, where there is weakness. Because if the members of Parliament recognize that it's the legitimate role of Parliament to check the executive, even when they are cooperating in advancing the national interest, then there's no way the presidency would operate with such arrogance. But on the side of Parliament, that hasn't happened either. So that's a question that we'll keep dealing with. My understanding, really, my own estimation is that that will be done by the next group that goes into power, where you ensure that institutions play their role, even when you recognize the principle of separation of powers, that each institution can operate independent of the other, but also cooperating in the common interest. We have not seen that yet. My hope is that the next group which goes into power would be different, and that it will start practicing that. However, again, to maybe wrap up on this, the deployment of UPDF, in spite of the Commander-in-Chief just doing it the way he did it, now that it is on the mission, now it is completely dependent on the commanders themselves. Because I served in an army, I served in uniform. I have a feeling that there is nothing that makes any officer or man in uniform more proud than that the country is behind them. It's not the salary. I mean, how much money would you pay for someone to go on a mission where they can lose their lives? They earn about 500,000 Uganda shillings. The officers will earn about $1 million now, 1.52 million. How much money is that? You can lose a life. So ordinarily, the very fact that the parliaments are involved is for the officer or man who is in uniform, when they're on a mission, to know that the country is behind them. So it is a very critical factor, because you are laying your life onto the line. You could die. But if you are dying, you die, in the comfortable understanding that you are fighting for a cause, that the country and the population are backing you up. So General Museveni's actions are selfish in nature. Of course, they deny the soldiers that. But knowing UPDF, the manner in which it has been operating, in spite of all those kinds of challenges, they keep conducting missions. They've made mistakes in a number of areas. They've also done well in others. Now that they're in Congo, my own understanding is that the commanders need to see it as an opportunity to clean their image. But the last time when they were in Congo, they messed it up. They lost focus of the mission. Officers went into looting of gold and timber, and the image was really damaged. So they need to salvage that image of UPDF and of the country, and hopefully, with the discipline that they can use, and the experience and the skills they have gathered, because they have operated in many, many theaters of war. They've been engaged in counter-insurgency operations. They've been engaged in counter-terrorism operations, and in a number of areas they've been effective, like they have been in Somalia. So they should use this opportunity not only to neutralize ADF, but also to conduct their operations in a manner that indeed recovers the image that they need to have, so that officers and men can feel proud, one, to be putting on a national uniform, two, that the population can start regaining trust in these mistakes are made. And once you make mistakes and you're able to admit that you messed up, then two things can happen. You can recover and reorganize and do better. If you don't do that, then it will be quite unfortunate.
I want to share with you following that. From the tweet, picking from the tweet of the UPDF spokesperson, Brigadier Flavia, she says UPDF troops, together with the FARDC, that's the Congolese army, have for the last 2 days been occupied with community engagement programs with the local communities to bridge the gap left after successful launch of Operation Shuja in DRC. And then another one where she shares a video is, she says, the joint forces reiterate the resolve of both countries to work together to ensure that the ADF is completely flushed out from wherever they are hiding. And then she also said that the community around North Kivu province in DRC have expressed optimism and faith in the joint forces to pacify the area. And there is also a video of women and locals in the DRC in areas that the UPDF is now going through. Isn't that adequate, General, in your view, to the extent that it responds to, or it should respond to what you are saying, that they need to clean up?
Well, if the mission is to eliminate ADF, I don't think it's something that's going to take 1 week. They've just hardly been there for 1 week. I think the commanders should really be psychologically prepared for the long haul. You know, I don't have a benefit of knowing what the ground is. I don't know the intelligence information that they have, but I would rather they go in with the mindset of, going in for the long haul to eliminate ADF, rather than hoping that they can do it just in 1 week or 2 weeks and pull back. It's going to be a complex operation from my own estimation. They have to be very, very careful. My hope is that they have to remain focused on the missions. Two, I would like to believe that they should not think that everything would go smooth all the time in war. There are times when you can make errors. And those errors can at times really be complex in nature. I have just seen about 2, 3, 4 days ago, I saw a clip which has been rotating. I've not seen it in the press. I don't know whether it's fake news. I don't know whether it is correct. But it's been indicated that there was a trading center called Munwaru, which looks like there could have been, it could have been bombed. I don't know whether it's correct or not correct. If it were correct, my own estimation of the situation would be that UPDF needs to own up. Own up, conduct investigations on what could have happened. Was it an intelligence failure in terms of the reconnaissance which was done to locate where the enemy camps were? Was it a failure on those who were, the artillery officers? Where did it come from? And if it is not correct that no such trading center was hit I mean, it will be the easiest thing to disprove because you just get journalists, you go take them to that trading center, and they find a trading center which is intact. This is going to be a complex operation because there are so many things which are going to happen. There are going to be fake news, there will be maybe collateral damage in terms of at times civilians getting killed in a situation like that. The manner in which you handle it is very, very critical in whether you recover integrity as an army, because you can have mistakes are made, even the most sophisticated armies in the world. I mean, it's just so the United States Army recently when a drone hit a vehicle in Afghanistan. Normally the best thing is you'd never wait for that to be exposed. You expose it immediately, because if it was done in error, you own it. Okay. You conduct an investigation and you go public with it. If you try to cover up, there are things you can't cover up. Eventually they come out. And when they come out, when you have not owned up, it can really put a lot of egg on your face. And then it becomes even very difficult to explain, because it will be as if it was deliberate.
Okay.
So they should be bold enough to know that it's a complicated operation. And the mission that, I mean, the engagement with the civilian population that we saw, one hopes they'll be able to sustain that. It's very important. Fighting counterinsurgency operations or even counter-terror operations, you need to apply the tools of winning hearts and minds. You know, you have to keep on explaining. Even when you make mistakes which are not willful, you have to explain, however complicated they might be. Some may not believe, but if you do it on a sustained basis and in good faith, then you'll be right in terms of conducting the mission that you are on.
Sarah, there is a common mantra that in war, the first casualty is the truth. Is there, like General says, can there be good faith in war, both sides?
Oh yeah, you can.
Yes, there can be. And I wanted to bring in a background of hot pursuit under public international law.
Yeah.
The doctrine of hot pursuit started with the maritime laws, and it was even codified in 1982 by the UN conventions, where if a ship or any vessel violated rules of over territorial waters, then a country would have a right to pursue them, even beyond the borders. The doctrine has since expanded to cover air and land, as in the hot pursuit. And after the 9/11 attacks in the US, UN enacted a resolution under 1373, you know, saying states have a duty to make sure that their territories are not used by armed rebels or terrorist groups. And if indeed such a situation happens, then the state which is under attack has a right to pursue the insurgent groups or terrorist groups and destroy their bases where they are located in another territory. So that gives us a background of this operation. It's well founded under public international law, but like General Muntu said, when it comes to our Constitution and UPDF Act, then we see acts that comply with the law, which is not new. We know we have leaders who don't respect or do what the Constitution demands and take it as hearsay. Because Article 214 of the Constitution provides for a brief in a situation of war or deployment of troops outside Uganda. Parliament should be briefed either prior to the deployment or in case there is need for surprise attack, which is normally the case under such circumstances. You need to surprise the enemy. Then within 42 hours, you should be able to brief Parliament. In situations where Parliament is in recess, the UPDF Act under Article 39 is very clear. You have 21 days to recall Parliament from recess and brief them. So in this situation, Parliament is in session, and the 72 hours for briefing or updating Parliament have passed, or seeking retrospective approval for deployment of troops outside Uganda. So given the basis of our laws, as much as there is urgent need to destroy bases of ADF, as much as we have a legitimate cause to collaborate and deploy in DRC, and as much as there is support in the public, if anybody challenged the conduct of the state in courts of law, then the state would be found to be in error in terms of abusing our laws as a country. So having said that, when it comes now to the rules that govern warfare, of course, truth, if you are not consistent and systematic in communications, truth becomes the first casualty. This is our third time as a country to go to DRC. The first time being 1965 under Milton Obote, and what followed was the famous gold scandal. The second time was 1998, 99, 2000. Two issues stood out of that mission: the Chisangan crashes and then the mineral plunder, a case that ended in the International Court of Justice, and we still owe DRC $10 billion in damages because we lost the case. And this is our third time. So the hope of the common citizen in Uganda is that we do not come out of DRC with a third scandal, like it was in 1965, like it was in 98, 2000. So this is 2021. Can it be smooth? Can it be dignified? Can it be less of scandals? And can it restore our image as a country in terms of our bilateral relations? I think, to me, that is the elephant in the room.
From your estimation, do you see that happening? Of course, shortly I will be coming to Honorable Mapinduzi from the Parliament perspective. But looking at it from this side, as a lawyer, do you see that happening? How can we even make this operation more dignified?
The beginning, in terms of cooperation with DRC at the bilateral level, is good. Seek, table your request, seek approval of a country, seek invitation to pursue the people that are destabilizing your country. It's a good beginning. We had the same collaboration under Operation Lightning Thunder around 2006, commanded by the late General London and others, to flush out LRA rebels in Garamba Forest. I think it happened for about 3 days. That attack happened when I was in DRC. We had a meeting that was discussing events under the auspices of the Great Lakes Conference, and part of the agenda was peace and security. We had the representatives of UPDF on the delegation. None of us had information. It was, and indeed that's expected. You should surprise the enemy. But it was unfortunate that when the attack happened, then we got information from other countries that indeed UPDF had attacked in the Garamba Forest. The other countries had information, and then we tasked the person who was representing UPDF to clarify matters for us. And it took him about 2 hours when other people had information. But it was also through a bilateral arrangement. Can it be made better? The communication, the spokesperson of UPDF has started well with her communications. There are timely updates, there is media, there are media briefings. You can control the narrative of a war. But if you fail, then other people will control the narrative for you.
Okay, Honorable Mapinduzi, from Parliament, you had eagerly waited for a minister, government to come and brief Parliament. That was never to happen, at least not today. Tell us, what is the latest from Parliament on this?
Well, if I'm to answer that question directly, then I'll say the waiting is still on.
The waiting is still on.
Let me just briefly look at two things. Yes, the UPDF is in Congo. Deployment has been done. And looking at two things, I look at the intention or the purpose for which deployment has been made. And I also look at the procedures or the legalities. I think just like General Muntu and Madam Sarah put it, all of us will agree that from what the country was going through, the intention, I would say, is a good one. Right from the bomb blast in Kampala, and of course the president made statements and said, you know, he would pursue the terrorists in the name of the ADF, and the ADF issue has been around for a while, even where they've been operating from. Every time the president would talk about that. So looking at the intention or the purpose for which the army has been deployed in Congo, I think the UPDF as an institution should be supported, should be given the moral support they need to ensure the safety and the security of the citizens. I think that one, we're all on the same page. But looking at the aspect of, you know, procedures and the legality, Parliament has very clear mandates in as far as, you know, the deployment of the UPDF, especially in a foreign country, is concerned. There are procedures that have to be followed, just like Madam Sarah stated. The army can be deployed, and the approval can be done later, or can even be done after the approval. Now, in this case, the UPDF went into Congo without seeking the approval of Parliament. And looking at the circumstances, you know, the kind of environment and all that, many of us will agree that probably that was necessary. Just like Sarah put it, the surprise attack, and the fact that, you know, what we are dealing with is a lot more complex. So it's okay that the deployment was done before seeking the approval of Parliament. But just like as the law says, there is the provision that calls for informing Parliament and the retrospective approval by Parliament within a span of about 72 hours. And that has not been done. And indeed in Parliament we have repeatedly raised this concern. A number of members of Parliament have expressed their concern and demanded that the executive comes forward to, first of all, inform Parliament in detail about what is going on, but also get the approval of Parliament. And that has not been forthcoming. We have.
What would you MPs want to know about this?
It
is a war. It is now a war. Someone would say, let me try to even be the devil's advocate. If I'm in the shoes of the commanders and the commander-in-chief, I would be saying, I can't let out in public what is going on. Let the war first be handled, you know, at the battlefront. And then these politicians who make too much noise, we shall tell them later.
Well, I will not. Well, it's interesting how you put it. I don't think the politicians in this country should be taken as, you know, noisemakers. I think there we will begin to go diversionary. let's put very clear questions. Do we have laws in place? Yes, we have the UPDF Act. We have the Constitution.
True.
What does the Constitution say? What does the UPDF Act say? There are clear provisions, and so when there are those provisions, we need to play by the rule. I don't think we should allow this country develop a culture of, unconstitutionalism or trying to play around with, that doesn't mean Parliament does not have the goodwill. Parliament has the goodwill to support. And indeed, Parliament of Uganda works in the interest of the citizen. And if the UPDF is in DRC Congo to pursue and deal with the ADF question, I don't think any member of Parliament would be against that, because it's about our people. It's about what the country has been going through the last few months or so. So the question of whether Parliament would support, I don't think that is a debate. But still, we need to formalize the process. Because what if next time that becomes a culture, and even when we are not faced with a similar situation, I don't think, because it starts with one mistake, and just like General Muntu put it, we need to deal with the level of laxity that is cropping up in this country. It's important to deal with that. And so for me, I think it's the responsibility of Parliament to demand that government gives a detailed report to Parliament, and Parliament obviously will not hesitate to support, because this is a good cause. And the other thing that is equally important to talk about, because this is not the first time the UPDF is going out, say to Congo and to Sudan and other countries. It's not the first time. And that's where I think the UPDF as an institution should be accredited for always doing a good job. But when the executive does not do what it is supposed to do, then the discussion begins to affect the morale of the UPDF as an institution. Because here we are dealing with two different institutions. The UPDF as an institution, as the army, obviously needs our support, but the executive has to do its part in making sure that laws are followed, making sure that institutions are respected, and Parliament needs to be respected, because Parliament represents the voice of the citizens, and the citizens have to give that moral support. So there should be no debate whether whether government should provide that information to Parliament. And well, if the fear is that there are a lot more sensitive issues that have to be dealt with, still government should step forward and say, Parliament, this is our intention, this is what is going on. We will be able to provide a lot more information, because if we provide ABCD, would jeopardize some of the process. We will be able to understand. So there should be that courtesy, and I think government needs to work on that.
Okay, I just need to check again whether Professor is finally online. Technical team, can you check? Professor?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Professor.
Yes, good evening, Charles.
Great to hear from you. I have been told by the technical team that your network is not very stable, so we have decided to first remove the video link in order to get you more clearly via voice alone. Is that okay with you?
That's fine with me, Charles.
Good. Professor, I'm here with, you will also tell us where you are hiding in South Sudan. I thought the best place for you to be is in Congo right now. But but given that some professors fear the sound of bullet, let me just say I am in the studio with General Mugisha Muntu, together with Sarah Birete and Honorable Ojara Mapenduzi, and we are discussing the what implications does the UPDF operations in DRC have, regionally, nationally, and even internationally? Let me bring you on board. When you saw the UPDF in Congo in combat, following the attacks, the bomb attacks, terrorist attacks in Kampala, what came to your mind?
Okay, Charles. So good evening, viewers. Good evening, fellow panelists. Sorry I can't be in the studio tonight, but when I saw the UPDF cross into the DRC, the first thing was that, well, finally, possibly, this will mark the end of the insurgency in Eastern DRC, where we have seen so many groups, both internally created and supported and regionally supported. Finally, I thought that what was set out in 1999 to deal with the negative forces would finally come true.
Now, do you think that this is the military operation, the hot pursuit, is the best way to respond to the terrorist attacks against us?
Well, I mean, look, ADF has been in the DRC since the 1990s. I have heard Sarah talk about hot pursuit. Yes, I mean, hot pursuit now is pretty much established in international law, both in terms of doctrine and state practice. But the point is that in the case of hot pursuit, normally it would mean that you go deal with a problem and then come back to your border. You don't occupy, because the moment you stay there, then it becomes an occupation, which is totally under different rules. But in this case, since we have, since Uganda has the support of the DRC government, I think, yes, I mean, in terms of state practice, it would mean that the hot pursuit would be legal. But I think the greater question which we would need to ask and try to seek answers is the military intervention the best to deal with this kind of problem? Because sometimes you may not necessarily need a military solution to this kind of problem. You may need to go political. It is politics. And how do you measure success in this kind of situation? Is it when the dead body of Musa Baluk, a couple of ADF rebels, or when you occupy the camps of ADF and you deny them the space where to operate? So my issue here is how do we measure success of this kind of intervention?
Professor, you teach political science, but you also teach issues of security, regional security, international security at the university. I just want you to draw for us parallels between this mission that we have just embarked on and the mission in, for example, Somalia. How different are they? What do you read?
Totally different. These are totally different operations. The mission in Somalia is a peacekeeping mission and authorized and mandated, actually mandated by the African Union, paid for by international partners. The mission in the DRC is a bilateral arrangement between Uganda and the DRC, which would mean that it would mean that we have to foot the bill for that operation, possibly with the support of the DRC government, since we are trying to get rid of negative forces on their soil. But also the other question, which I had bits of it, which you asked the honorable who is in the studio, is why don't we involve the parliament? I think it's a very legitimate issue that the law in this country, Constitution and UPDF Act, are very clear that the executive has a responsibility to explain to the people of Uganda through parliament how and why the deployment has been done. And that is something which you cannot avoid, even if you are in the executive, because if you keep quiet, then that becomes a totally different thing. And then also, The parliament is important because of appropriations. The UPDF is not going to, it's not on a Red Cross mission in DRC. They are spending taxpayers' money. And the people who do appropriations and oversight is parliament. So parliament must be informed. And this idea that the executive can keep quiet 7 days after the deployment, and as you said in your own words that you are playing a devil's advocate, you wouldn't want to tell parliament because they are noisemakers. That is neither here nor there. In fact, actually, it's not being a devil's advocate. It's actually distorting what the law demands. So parliament must be informed and should be informed of what is taking place.
Professor, you made a comment and you referred to some of these issues being political and whether this is military operation, this is arising out of a political disagreement or political issues. In terms of the way forward and dealing with extremism, what is your view on how Uganda can, in a sustainable manner, deal with rising extremism, rising cases of terrorism? Can the military interventions as they are right now be a solution?
No, it's a combination of mechanisms. Because the military itself will not resolve the issue of extremism or violent or radicalization. What we need to do is to simultaneously do certain things. First of all, ask ourselves, why do people become radicalized? What is the issue? Is it because of their family backgrounds? Is it because of their political views? Is it because of ideology? Is it because of religion? Why do people become radicalized? And if we get the answer to that, then the mechanism can be found on how to deal with the radicalization. But what I can tell you in this country, what I have seen is we have had so many insurgencies. These insurgencies, some have been ended through military means, but others have persisted. And you will need to ask your question, why have those ones, why have they not been ended? Is it because we are applying wrong solutions to the problem? But for me, from where I sit, I think that the issue of radicalization is not only Uganda, because it's a regional problem. Boko Haram in Nigeria, Niger, Chad, Cameroon, all the insurgencies in the Sahel. We have this Al-Shabaab, we have Mozambique, we have all these networks. So it's not a unique situation which we face as a country, but the point is the military solution enough? And I'm saying, no, we need to do a combination of things. One, have deliberate de-radicalization programs. When people come from the insurgencies, how do we treat them? Yes, they can get amnesty. So how do they, what in amnesty, what do we give them? Do we give them skills? For example, someone who has been holding a gun for the last 25 years, the only skill he knows is that. Are there programs to rehabilitate and reintegrate these people in the society? And that is not a military, that's not a military solution, certainly. That's not a military issue, certainly. It has to do with, the social, economic, political mechanism. So this is what I'm saying.
Professor, for now I want to ask you a final question and then keep you online, and I come back to the studio a bit to pursue other perspectives. When we talk about terrorism and international, global terrorism, what comes to my mind, if you looked at Somalia, since 1991, up to now it is not yet finished. The Americans led the world into that into that confrontation. Up to now, we are now sucked into it. You look at you look at Iraq from 2003. Again, America leading a coalition of forces. We were a part of that and supported that at the beginning in 2003 as well. And now we also have similar situations. We are in other places. In CAR, we are in in Somalia, now we are into Congo. What thoughts do you have for our UPDF, our army, that we must stand behind when they are confronting an enemy, especially from the outside? We must support them, but that we also have to balance with our political needs and the needs of serving the people's interests?
You see, we say that it's people who fight wars. It's not the armies which fight wars. The armies need the people to be behind them. Now, when you see these kinds of interventions, of course, the explanation that we normally give, or what is normally given, is we undertake these interventions in the name of Pan-Africanism because we need to help our African folks. So the intervention in Somalia, the intervention in South Sudan, of course, at some point when CAR, at some point when Liberia. So these are missions which are undertaken within the context of Pan-Africanism. But even because we are members of the United Nations and members of African Union, and the view in these organizations is that we have a responsibility to be our brother's keeper. I mean, you only need to look at the opening statement in the UN Charter, which says that we the peoples are determined to save the succeeding generation from the scourge of conflict. So this is part of the conversation that we are engaged in. But I think it's important that again we go back to the issue of how do you report to the people, because the executive report to the people, does the deployment, but it has to report to the people through parliament. So the parliament must be informed in whichever way you want to put it. The parliament will have to be informed at some point. Now, of course, there are issues to do with the timelines, which are constitutional. But what comes to my mind is that I think it is incumbent on the executive to tell us. First of all, we are not talking about tactics, which the UPDF is using in the DRC. We are looking at the broad strategic intervention. Why are we there? What is the mission? What is the end game? When shall we get back our troops from there? These are explanations which we need the answers to. And that can only happen when Parliament is informed.
Okay, good. Let me come back to the studio and hold the line there. Don't go off, Professor. We will definitely.
No. I'm around. I'm still around.
Thanks a lot. General, Professor raises a number of issues. We can keep with them a bit. And going forward, there is this issue of political issues that look like political issues leading us into military operations. Politically, do you think that, how do you think in your view that our issues should be resolved as a country, as a region?
We are caught up in a very complex situation. Here we have a group that applies methods which are indiscriminate.
The terrorists.
Terrorist methods.
Yeah.
You know, you blow a bomb on Parliamentary Avenue or wherever they have been blowing bombs, and anybody, you know, it doesn't have to be someone who supports government or someone who is even involved in politics at all. That's indiscriminate.
Yeah.
And therefore, in my own estimation, that becomes a legitimate target for all of us to support, means to eliminate that kind of threat. That's on one side. However, on the domestic front, we are involved in political contestation. Those of us in the opposition believe that this regime, that General Museveni is in power by fraud. But de facto, he's the one running the country. He's the commander-in-chief. He's the one who deploys police, intelligence services. So he's the one who has, and the regime, to take care of security of persons and property. So we have to know that until we succeed to get a better group in power, issues of security are being handled by the sitting regime. And therefore one hopes that this deployment of UPDF in Congo can eliminate the threat of terrorism. As we continue pursuing the internal domestic mission of how we can take power from the hands of those who use it recklessly. As we are not going to go into the details of what has been happening in regard to that. It has its own, of course, problems. There's no doubt about that. Because the more you use power in a manipulative way, in a repressive way, in a way that causes grievances, that causes complications on the domestic front. So while UPDF is fighting ADF, and I really hope that they'll be able to eliminate ADF, those of us who are engaged in politics have, and the Ugandans themselves, and in this particular case, for example, like Parliament, to know that we've been engaged in a vicious cycle in this country. You can imagine, I had even almost forgotten, Sarah is the one who raised the issue of the first time. I had completely forgotten that
the first time we went into Congo.
Uganda Army went into
1965.
1965.
Professor, General, you should not forget that one because it was perhaps more popular than all the rest.
You know, I had completely forgotten about that one.
The gold scandal.
The gold scandal, which caused chaos in Parliament and became the beginnings of eventually what happened, you know, the coup in '71.
Yeah.
So we've been involved in a vicious cycle. And we have to break out of that vicious cycle, you know, which it requires engagement of all Ugandans who want to see sanity in governance. But
General,
General, yes.
Again, sorry to interrupt you. Again, being a devil's advocate,
yes.
Doesn't that actually absolve, you know, the current government from the criticisms you're leveling against it, to say that actually our problems are not necessarily caused by it, but there are other factors, including the ones that caused 1965.
You see, leadership is about proving that you are capable of meeting the challenges of a country and resolving them.
At the time.
You cannot start comparing yourself with the mistakes of others. Just simply can't.
Yeah.
You know, the current regime likes that line a lot. Whether it's on the economic front, whether it is on the political front, every time you know, you challenge them and you push them the wall, they compare where we are with where we used to be. It's a weak way of managing. If you really want to do things in a focused, disciplined way, you target the end state where you want to be. And you keep comparing yourself at every point where you are with where you ought to be, not where you were coming from. You know, but that's the nature of this regime. I don't think they're about to change in their mindset. And therefore, really, we as a Ugandan people need to keep focused on how do we manage our country better. And the current challenge that we face in terms of, for example, of the insecurity that there is in Congo. Because ADF, even when they eliminate ADF, when UPDF eliminates ADF, my hope is that the current president of Congo would continue moving the direction he is moving, to keep engaging with the countries in East Africa, to work towards having total control or state presence in Eastern Congo. Because once the DRC government works within the East African framework, and hopefully the East African community countries would forget about whatever other contradictions they may have and focus on stabilizing Eastern Congo. And hopefully they also stabilize the situation in South Sudan. And also deal with the domestic problems, political problems within, like in this case, Uganda, ourselves, and whichever other challenges there might be. So that as East African community, there is stability in each country, there is discipline in managing national resources, and focusing on growing our economies on a steady path. Because when you have a fast-growing populations, as we do have in this region, two, there is a realignment of forces globally. Because we are so sucked into our domestic challenges in many parts of Africa, we seem to have completely lost sight of the realignment of forces on a global scale. Economically, politically. When you are weak, we have not yet reached a point where the lambs will lie in the bosoms of lions. We have not reached that yet. When you are weak, they'll take advantage of you. People seem to forget that even as we grapple with issues like of ADF, that we should focus a lot in how we can strengthen ourselves as countries, and therefore have close cooperation at a region level and also continentally.
General, can you hold it there?
Yes.
I want us to go for a break, and then when we come back, I'll give you 1 or 2 more minutes and then bring in your colleagues here. But let's take a break right now. This is Behind the Headlines.
Everyone deserves more this festive season, which is why MTN Momo is giving you more Senku points on your MTN Momo withdrawals at agent locations. Get 150 Senku points for every 1,000 shillings spent in withdrawal fees. More Senku points means you get more free minutes, more free MBs, more free SMSs, and more free Momo Pay shopping. To use your Senku points, dial *141#.
Everywhere you go, MTN.
Introducing the all-new Roofing's TMX 500C rebars with cut and bend surfaces. Roofing's, strength of a nation.
Transact and win money after money with Airtel Money. 1.5 billion shillings in cash prizes up for grabs.
Mariam, in your Lantoro, Tabedo Jinja, Tadio Star 185. Tachulo Rigo TV for a month. After 2 days, your Airtel Jobinojo Goran Simu sana winning 100,000.
The more you transact, the higher your chances of winning. Airtel Money, instant, secure, borderless.
It's the festive season and we love it. And that means it's time to celebrate with GoTV.
Come with me.
So get your GoCoder and GoTV value for 25,000 shillings to watch with the whole family. And if you're feeling extra festive, upgrade to our best package yet, GoTV Super.
Something to look forward to.
Download the My GoTV app for more information.
Super.
We all deserve a super festive season. And with GoTV, there's every reason to love it.
Transact and win money after money with Airtel Money. 1.5 billion shillings in cash prizes up for grabs.
Nyombe Marusi Ronald, Ngazwarua, Mitolu Star, Alo Aro Toi, Hash, mi daily milu airtime je mi cho mi MBs data je then milu choti milu isu in the banlu sender abalu mi call customer care lo mi call early o mini in the sender.
The more you transact, the higher your chances of winning. Airtel Money, instant, secure, borderless.
Welcome back from the break. This is Behind the Headlines. This December 8th, 2021, we are discussing the implications of the operations, the military operations by the UPDF in the DRC. Of course, that followed the throwing of bombs by the terrorists, and which led to the death of some of our innocent people in Kampala, and leading to that operation through hot pursuit. General, before we went into the break, you were submitting on the need for regional stabilization and growing our economies and politics in the region. Just finalize on that point.
We've got fast-growing populations, we've got young populations, high levels of unemployment.
Growing radicalization.
Growing radicalization. And, you know, until we are able to stabilize the domestic politics and have robust cooperation on a regional level, and then the region like East Africa connects effectively with the SADC and with the ECOWAS, so that we can build robust economies and also a stable continent, we will be taken advantage of more and more. And that creates vulnerability to a scale that is even beyond what we have seen yet.
But is that possible,
the only what I have is the pettiness of the leaders that we have, the short-sightedness of leaders that we have. Even when they talk about the building of African strength, how will you build strength if you are, walking over your own people? Because strength comes from participation of the people. You build capability. You can and goodwill from a population. So that even in the event that you are going to have confrontation with the external world, because there are those who want to exploit Africa, you have the backing of the population, because the population is satisfied with the domestic situation, political as well as economic. You can't make confrontation with some of these powers unless you are stable internally. You cannot be stable internally unless you create a political environment where people participate, where you build economies where people are benefiting, where there is justice. You just simply can't. And many African leaders are full of talk. You hear them go, blasting imperialism, doing this, doing that. They can break you like a matchstick if you have not built internal capabilities. They lose sight of that. Yeah, that's what I just want to say.
That's a good one. Sarah, I want to instead bring you on board. The follow-up question I want. General makes a good point, especially on the need to stabilize, unite Africa, the region, and then that will take us out of this. But someone would say, is that the panacea really? Because if you go to West Africa, we also have problems of the Boko Haram, the Al-Qaeda disturbing them as well. In Mali, we have problems, and all these jihadist movements are disturbing us there as well. And you would think that West Africa, through, is it ECOWAS, looks more organized, more united, more strong than East Africa. Would that really be a problem? I mean, a solution?
Even in our local terminology, we say power lies in unity.
True.
Look at how the developed world is organized. They have blocks, strong blocs. Look at EU, look at the Arab League, look at the way the US rallies everybody, them themselves being a federation, the United States. You know, strength lies in unity. Africa had picked on well in terms of regional blocs and the African Union. And recently we are reflecting, saying, look, Africa is, you know, regressing back into military coups. Where is African Union? Do you feel its visibility? Do you feel its relevance? Do we really have even reason to belong, other than a few people having jobs and then being a club for presidents to just go meet and hang out? Is there any relevance with the African Union when it comes to the common person? We are back into a cycle of coups. In the last 2 years, we have had about 6 coups in Africa.
Yeah.
So where is that African Union Constitutive Act that condemned and eliminated coups? Where did that power go? And without proper track on democratization, how do you even eliminate coups? Is Uganda, for example, immune from coups, given that we have failed to transit from one leader to another for 6 decades? For 6 decades, you have a nation that has failed to create an environment for peaceful handover of power. Can we even celebrate that we have overcome coups in this country, given the nature of elections, given the fraud, given the violence? Just yesterday, some sanctions were announced on human rights violations, the impunity. We are not even immune. We can't even celebrate until Museveni peacefully hands over power to another leader. We can't celebrate. Our constitution, which we thought would give us a basis, you know, has been mutated at several levels and aspects, to the extent that even the remains of the constitution are not respected. Somebody thinks they can sit and take decisions and there is no need. You know, Professor Kasaija was talking about military not being the only needed option. Yes, you can flush out ADF. You can destabilize and their base. Then what happens beyond that?
In fact, it was done in 2007. It was actually done. They regrouped.
Did it solve the problem? So the rules of warfare, do we have a plan, a contingency plan for civilians, for the wounded, for prisoners of war, right of passage for Red Cross, right of passage for children? You know, the way wars are fought, it is not just a matter of might. I'm here, you know, with my artillery. No. And then Amnesty was putting us on note saying we are watching. Respect the rules of the game. In a situation of war, you have 3 centers of responsibility. One is individual responsibility. So the officers deployed in DRC, each of them must take individual responsibility for their actions. Then you have command responsibility, and then state responsibility. We have failed before on state responsibility. The reason we found ourselves in the International Court of Justice. So what are we going to do differently? And these are issues that must be explained to Parliament. Under the same command, we have failed our duty under state responsibility in a foreign territory. So you cannot say that I am the overall, I am the alpha and omega. You have failed before. We have a debt of $10 billion on our head due to state failure, command failure, and individual failure on DRC mission. So what are we doing differently to prevent this? It's very urgent that we explain our plan. Even if ADF, some of the people, of course, it's indoctrination. Most of the people we've been seeing include children. So what is the plan? There is what is called the disarmament, rehabilitation, resettlement, and reintegration. If you don't involve Parliament today, you go and capture children in DRC bases. What are you going to do with them? Who is going to appropriate the money? What is the plan for their rehabilitation, resettlement, and reintegration back in their families? Do we have all these plans? So these are the questions that must be explained.
Honorable Mapenduzi, now that, let me start by asking you, in the event that government does not come to respond to your questions as Parliament, and to ask these questions of government and seek answers, what do you as Parliament do?
Well, I have tried very much to restrain myself from having that kind of thought. Because...
Unfortunately, you must have it as an MP.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to begin thinking that way. Because such thoughts are quite frustrating. My expectation is that the executive would realize the need to respect every institution and allow different institutions to function. Parliament needs to be allowed to do its part. And as members of Parliament, we will very firmly demand for accountability, and we will have to very consistently hold everyone accountable. So I definitely see the direction you are bringing this question from, because, you know, members of Parliament have expressed, and to this day we haven't got any report. We have not been informed. We haven't. So you are right to say that. But you know, just like General Muntu put it, it's difficult to tell when the UPDF will finish this. And you know, the other fear that I have is that we have neighbors that have got a lot of issues. And that emphasizes what Sarah said, the need for us to look at this matter from a regional perspective, but also the need to unite, the need to stabilize. When you look at Congo, DR Congo, I have been to Congo during the peace talks. I went to meet Joseph Kony together with other leaders from northern Uganda in Garamba Forest. Why Joseph Kony was able to stay for a much longer time in South Sudan? Because there was no stable government. Yeah. And where there is no functional government, you will have wrong elements operating everywhere. But when South Sudan started shaping up, and they found it difficult to operate the way they used to, and they moved to Congo. And they started operating in Garamba Forest, and again when the UPDF and the South Sudanese and the UN and other people started working together, they found their way into Central African Republic. I went up to Obo in Congo. There are places in Congo you don't feel government presence, and that gives an opportunity for people of that wrong elements to find the time to plan whatever kind of. So there is definitely need. The moment you have neighbors who have a lot of issues, you will always have very serious effects. And so much as the UPDF right now is in Congo, maybe this is just one. We by God's grace, we go ahead and have the ADF issue addressed. Then tomorrow you have something else, because you have a neighbor that. So there is need to build a strong kind of environment regionally, so that the Congolese government, the South Sudan government, and all the other neighbors begin to get a lot more involved in the affairs of the region. So when there is any problem, everyone comes together to confront it. That can solve the problem. The other thing that just to link to the question you gave is that at some point, still the UPDF and government will need parliament. Because what is going on right now, you do not know how much it will take. Parliament will need to provide resources, you know. These are things that we will do because we love this country, because our people have to be safe, because the UPDF as an institution needs to be supported. We will do that. But again, what kind of precedent are we trying to set when you refuse to perform a constitutional mandate? You are expected to inform Parliament. Even the deployment is not the question. The question is, even after deployment, how long do you take to inform Parliament? What if tomorrow you need Parliament to step in and provide, make certain approvals and all that? Do you come when you are desperately in need of help, or you need to make sure laws are followed and building a culture where every institution feels that sense of ownership? So it's important. Now finally, the professor online made mention something important. He said the ADF has been around for quite some time. Yes, it is true.
True.
All of us agree to that. But when you look at how they operated years back and what started happening a few months ago, then you need to know that probably even in the future, things are going to be a lot more challenging because their methods of operation has changed. The army was able to handle them some years back. They were pushed, they vanished, and they started reorganizing. Today they are terrorizing people, the bomb blast and all that. So we never know. Maybe tomorrow or in future, maybe they would change to another method of operation, and that calls for a very systematic planning. That requires government to see further than what we are just seeing right now. So sustainability is important. And so when General says he's not sure whether it's going to take a shorter time, definitely it may take a longer time. But how does government plan? How does the UPDF work with the different institutions to make sure it is sustained and the problem is solved? So for me, as a member of parliament, we will continuously demand that government complies with the law. There is no way we can allow that level of laxity, and so on our part we will keep on demanding. Okay. Probably you wanted me to say, okay, if they refuse, what do we do? I don't think...
You will move on to other things.
Well, I don't think they will refuse.
Okay.
I only think they have to improve so that next time, yes, right now they have already delayed. It has gone past what the law says. But still, they will have to come and provide those information to Parliament.
Okay.
But it's good to build a good practice.
Someone called Mivule Ronald has shared with us a message. He says, I have perused through article, he says article, but this is section. An act is section, Mivule. Article is for the Constitution. So he says section 39 of the UPDF, and it only talks about parliamentary approval in relation to peacekeeping and peace enforcement and not hot pursuit. And he says, he has sent it here, he said, verbatim, that deployment of troops for purposes of peacekeeping shall be done with approval of Parliament. And then he adds that peacekeeping and hot pursuit are two different things, and he has shared with me I forgot my own act in the vehicle. So, but Mivule, thank you very much, Ronald, for this. Section 39 is actually very instructive. The president may deploy troops outside Uganda for purposes of peacekeeping or peace enforcement, and section 39 That subsection 2 says deployment of troops for purposes of peacekeeping shall be done with the approval of Parliament. And subsection 3 says where the President deploys troops under this section, when Parliament is on recess, the President shall immediately summon Parliament to an emergency. It cuts. I will try and get the right one. And then someone from someone called Walker from Aleb Tong says, good evening, Charles and the guests. Kindly ask General Muntu to tell us why it has taken long for UPDF to publicly showcase the ADF camps destroyed by the recent airstrike. That is from John Walker. John Walker, I'm not sure that you want General to respond to that, but since you have asked, let General will respond to it. And then someone here called Bwire James. He says he's called Bwire James Mbabazi. He says, for us, Team Musevenists, we are live watching UBC from Mbale City. Well done. Bwire, enjoy. And there was another message from another person. Let me try to rip them off and then share them. My team is trying to extract, the network is poor, but they are trying to extract the messages that are on Twitter so that we can share them with you. But let me first go back to...
briefly, Charles, on peace enforcement.
Yeah.
Just a quick search on the meaning of peace enforcement. It's the use of military force to compel peace in a conflict, generally against the will of combatants. And to do this, it generally requires more military force than peacekeeping. So when the law says peacekeeping or peace enforcement, we are in DRC to secure peace for Uganda. So it's just semantics.
Bwire, there you are again. And this is a senior lawyer trying to interpret for you the law, Bwire.
And maybe just to add to what Sarah said, where we sometimes go wrong is when we fail to understand why certain things are being brought forward. I think what we are talking about is not why the UPDF is in Congo. The main thing here is what procedures then should be followed. Their being in Congo, I think, is acceptable based on what we have experienced and the need to make sure Ugandans are safe. So there should be no question about why the UPDF. The intention is clear. The question is about what then needs to be done, because there are institutions that have to all different institutions accountable.
Yeah.
So that is what we are talking about.
Okay.
Yes, you're in Congo, come back, report to Parliament. So that next time when you need help, Parliament can go ahead to provide.
And then Parliament will definitely account to the people on your behalf.
That is right.
Very important. The Professor Kasaija, are you still standing by?
Yes, I'm still around.
Good. Professor, there are a number of limbs to this debate that have come up in the subsequent discussions we have had. This General raised a fundamental one on stabilizing or stabilization of the region of Africa, the question of leadership in Africa, and then he also touched on the issues to do with the radicalization of a fast-growing population, the increasing rate of extremism. Do you think, how do you think this should be tackled in order to de-escalate terrorism issues?
Thank you, Charles. the whole thing has to be looked at in a holistic way. Yes, I mean, radicalization is a fact. We have people who are being radicalized. We have people who are joining terrorism. We have a young population, certainly. Africa is a young continent. There are those who have been lured into these activities. But as I said, it's not only, we should not only use one method. There should be other methods also. We can use the military, but simultaneously with other things. Because at the end of the day, the military is not going to be everywhere where there's radicalization. So you have to have a systematic program which gives people, I think, gives people hope. I mean, those who are the hopeless, they should be given hope. And that can only happen if you have these programs to do with de-radicalization, making counter-narratives in terms of those people who are trying to use, for example, religion to join these activities. There must be counter-narratives and you know, to dissuade them from going into these activities. And that is not military. So we do need to have people who are the psychologists and all the others who are supposed to do these things. But it is a fact. I can tell you, it is a fact that we do have radicalization in the region, radicalization in Africa. We have issues of terrorism, but it is the way we respond. How do we lure these people away from those who have bad intentions?
But isn't that easier said, Professor? Because yes, you can provide, if you watch some of the videos that are showing, you know, children, you really see someone 10 years, 12 years, and imagine that they have taken 5 to 7 years, you know, being brainwashed and indoctrinated and told that the gun is the best way to survive, and they now see that that is the best way to achieve whatever their masters are telling them that they can achieve.
No, but you see, the thing is, because I have seen those videos, yes, there are children who are being lured into this, either by their parents or by the recruiters. But there must be a counter narrative. Why would anybody want to join this group when the person has skills, for example? If you have skills, yes, I know you will ask the question. We have had instances in which I remember I was working in Somalia, and the first suicide bomber that we got was a gentleman who came from Norway, attended the best universities in the world, and eventually blew himself up in Somalia. Are those cases, the extreme cases? But invariably, what you would find on this continent is that the people who join these groups will be lured because they want money, because they want riches, or because they have been brainwashed, they will die and they go to heaven and they don't know meet who. So there must be systematic, we have to invest. We have to invest in these programs, because our programs, I can tell you this, and this is for a fact, our de-radicalization programs are weak. Even if you go to the Amnesty Commission today and you ask the number of people who have benefited from amnesty and what they have been given, and those who are still complaining about not getting what they were promised when they were seeking amnesty, these are issues, I think, which we need to address, structural issues which we need to address, and that is not going to be the military. This is what I'm telling you, Charles.
Professor, on the question of East Africa as a region, you have seen that the ADF was at one time very active until the UPDF went after them and disorganized them and depleted their strength around 2007. But now they have regrouped under a different leadership and different funders, and now are causing new mayhem. Do you think that there is optimism, given this bilateral arrangement or military arrangement, that the new leadership in DRC can stand up to the occasion and maybe resolve this matter once and for all and take away the UPDF from Eastern Congo?
Charles, we need to understand one thing. Yes, the ADF existed as ADF up to 2015. What we are dealing with in DRC today is basically there are two groups. If you don't know, I will tell you. There are two groups. One group has expressed support for ISIS. That's why now they call it the Islamic State of Central African Republic, Central African Province. But we also have the ramp group of ADF, which has moved away from, which used to be North Kivu, now they're in South Kivu, led by the son of the former leader of NALU, the National Army for Liberation of Uganda, if you remember. That is the ramp ADF which is remaining. And this is research which has been done recently on the group. So we have two groups. You have the group which is led by Musa Baluku, who is the successor of Jamil Mukuru, which has expressed allegiance to Islamic State, and now it is calling itself Islamic State of Central African Province. And then you have the ramp NALU, which is in South Kivu, led by a gentleman called, I think it's called Sokanero or something like that. So there are two different groups now. Now, if you're talking about ADF itself, I don't know whether UPDF is going after ADF or is going after the Islamic State of Central African Province. I think we need to make this distinction very clear. Now, in whichever way, for both groups, the most important thing is that these are negative forces, in whichever way you want to put it. Because remember, if you read the Lusaka Agreement of 1999, these are groups which were declared to be negative and which were supposed to be eliminated 20 or 22 years ago, but they have not. But unfortunately, because of the absence of a government in Eastern DRC, we have had the mushrooming of all these groups, which today would number more than 130 at the last count. Groups which are either allied to the government in the DRC or allied to governments in the region, or basically local groups which are seeking for resources. So the point is, can the UPDF eliminate all those groups from the Eastern DRC, apart from the ADF? Because you remember that these groups even now work together. Evidence now has emerged where the groups in the Islamic State of Central African Province collaborates with Boko Haram, collaborates with the Al-Shabaab in terms of training, in terms of knowledge transfer. So these are the issues, I think, which we need to first of all disaggregate, see which group we are dealing with, and then we craft the right medicine to deal with the groups. But otherwise, if we take it as a whole, I mean, like every other, we are looking for ADF, presumably we might not even see the ADF. This is what I'm saying.
In that state, therefore, how long do you envisage our stay in this time in the DRC from your reading?
I can tell you, even we as teachers, we are not witch doctors. If you watch Nigerian films, only witch doctors found, witchcraft is found in those. They are the ones who can tell you what is going to happen to you in the next minute. But myself, I cannot do it. I don't have the capacity to do that. I don't have the crystal ball to see what is going to happen tomorrow. But as General Muntu said, I think we should be prepared for a long haul, because not only are we going to destroy the camps of the ADF, but we also need to occupy those camps, which would mean for them for us to deny them space of operation. So which would mean that we'll have to be there for a long time. But to see, when we stay there for a long time, mistakes are going to be committed. And as the Nobel Peace Prize winner I've just been reading of the DRC, Mukwege, said that like the last time around when we went there, errors are bound to be committed. And at the end of the day, we will suffer from what Professor Nsimambi used to call, we will be lugubrious. Lugubrious in the sense that it will end up like the last time around when we were accused of stealing minerals and doing all those things. But generally we should be in for the long haul if we are to deny the ADF the space and all the other groups deny them space from which to operate.
Okay. Just hold it there, Professor. General Muntu, Professor paints a picture, of course, you know that we should prepare there to be there for the long haul. You earlier said something similar. In that case, how do we manage a region which is so vast, a region which at one time sucked in, I think, over 8 countries? Angola, I think there was Angola, there was Zimbabwe, you know, Uganda, Rwanda. All these places were sucked into a war that became bloody. How do we manage it minus denting our own image, whether there or back here, with all that vast, you know, minerals, resources, and all that? And I'm asking that from a military, we need to benefit from your military knowledge.
The discipline of the commanders on the ground is going to be a critical issue, more so if they are going to spend there any length of time. Once you have commanders who are disciplined and they remain focused on the mission, it is possible even to operate within an area for quite a long time. I mean, UPDF has been in Somalia for quite a while. And largely, even when there are some errors made, but largely you would say that they have been succeeding in the missions that they've been conducting in Somalia. And this hasn't been a, you know, an easy role, you know, fighting insurgents. More so like in Mogadishu and the other areas which were built up areas and highly populated. But largely they've been able to pull it off. Same thing, they can apply the same discipline even when they're in Congo, once they remain disciplined and focused on the mission. And my hope is that they only remain focused on the elimination of ADF. About the other groups, which are so many, I don't know exactly what the thinking or the strategies that DRC leadership would want to apply. But my hope is that that's a question that will need to be discussed by the East African community. I know, for example, there has been a plan, and I think they initiated it. I don't know how far they have gone in building an East African standby force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they could build that, increase its capabilities, and have it deployed in an area like Congo once there's a political agreement. Because stabilizing Eastern Congo, and as the DRC force is also built, and Eastern Congo to have, or DRC government to build a presence, administrative as well as security in every part of Eastern DRC. Eventually is going to be the solution. Stabilize that whole area and then enable the Congolese people and whoever they allow in to do business to develop Eastern Congo as well as the rest of Congo. Because that's where the solution is. Not only for Congo, but for the whole of East Africa. Because how do you respond to the needs in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of economic well-being, of growing populations, a young population, unless we create stability in all these countries? And hopefully the leaders are focused on growing their economies without being sucked into corruption, which is also one of the biggest problems we have on this continent. So that once we build robust economies, stable countries, coordinated, then we can protect ourselves even from the, you know, those who would really want to keep on exploiting us, because people do not recognize that the realignment of forces on a global scale, one of the regions which is still weak is Africa. And we are sitting on huge deposits of minerals which the rest of the world wants. And when you are weak, you know, people should understand that there are even those who wouldn't want us to be stable.
True.
Because when you are not stable, they
can
keep on
be
exploiting you.
Exploited.
You know, but that requires strategic thinking at the leadership level in all the countries. It requires discipline. It's We are vulnerable as a people. You know, we are vulnerable as a people, as single countries, as sub-regions, even as a continent. When you see the global dynamics right now, any leader in Africa who is not worried about that and who therefore doesn't recognize that doing things on the domestic front to create strength, that person is short-sighted or is so selfish in their thinking that they are incapable of looking at the larger picture. But again, that's where the role of people come in. Because where there's a threat as societies, as countries, because of the weakness we have as countries, the population themselves, I mean, in Uganda now we're not like how we were in 62, because when we became independent, largely a big part of our population was not well educated, many people were not exposed. Even the mistakes which were made by leaders at that point, maybe you can give them the benefit of doubt, there wasn't exposure. There are no excuses we can make now. Many people are educated. So many people who in their different professional positions that they have, exposed. Who can't see that we must resolve the domestic political problems? You have a leader of a country who simply doesn't understand that institutions are the most critical thing that creates stability, long-term stability for a country, that there must be functioning systems, that a country of 45 million people cannot depend on the goodwill of any single individual. That's short-sightedness. But see, an individual can be sacked and unable to manage. We are all emotional beings. The emotions which can overrun us as individuals. That those who are disciplined enough and by God's grace have got the capability to control their emotions. But if you have an individual who is at the level of leading a country and they have not been able to rein in emotions, I've just talked about arrogance and its cousin pride can cause people to do things which at times you cannot understand. How can someone do something like that? But they are not looking at the larger picture. Because they are looking at themselves, they are at the center. Short-sightedness can make any of us as an individual. If your emotions run you, and you think that you are the center of everything that happens, you don't see the larger picture. You look at yourself as the reference point for anything that happens around you. It is short-sightedness because you don't even know whether you're going to be alive in the next 10 minutes. None of us knows that. But see, that individual doesn't know that. Because the emotion of pride, the emotion of arrogance and selfishness have wrapped the thinking, the rationality of the mind of this kind of person. So that's one problem. But see, the biggest problem and the most worrying problem is that you have so many people who are educated and they simply cannot understand that, you know what, we cannot allow ourselves to be vulnerable because of one individual who's got lost in his or her own emotions. And therefore, literally go into hiding. They don't want to we are vulnerable as a people.
Okay. Let me first get, my technical team says there are some messages which have come from the viewers out there. Starting with the one from Lukwago David, who says, I'm from Salam Road. I love the characters of General Muntu. Really, Uganda needs such a man to be a president. Next, General, there you have some good message for you. Richard Tabu from Busia says, I personally like the submission from Ms. Birete Sarah that AU is just a club for African leaders to go and have handshakes and tea with no visible and focused agenda that yields results for a common man. Thank you, Richard. Next, Kabagambe from Mubende says, I beg to know, I hear many MPs saying government, who are government, yet Parliament is a third pillar of government. Is Parliament an NGO part of government? Honorable Ojara, you hear that?
that one should just get a cup of tea. Should just take tea.
Someone called Kivumbi Ernest Benjamin says UPDF operation makes Uganda great. And Joseph Mulinde from Chira says big thanks to Council Sarah Birete. She just articulates international law so well. So Sarah, thanks there for you. And then Thierry Sekunzi says, I support UPDF's presence in Congo for two reasons. MONUSCO has failed to stabilize and bring peace in DRC. They are just in business. Sarah, I'm going to ask you to respond to that question. Then two, Uganda as good neighbor has interest to bring peace in Uganda, between Uganda, I think, versus Congo. Via Congo. Bring peace in Uganda via Congo. That's what Thierry says. Because this is terrorism issue which every country can deal with. Sarah, Thierry raises an important point. We have been touching on the issue of, a vast region of Eastern Congo which is almost absent of leadership. And we have been told even the UN Peace, the Stabilization Force, many of its commanders are now engaged in business. They are also lost in that vast territory. And then here we are as a country, we are supposed to now fight our way, and where the UN system has failed. What's your view of this? Shall that, will we succeed in doing what the UN has failed?
Yes, we can.
I like that. Obama is back. Yes, we can.
We can. All we need is focused leadership. The International Crisis Group has estimated the number of rebel groups or negative forces in Eastern DRC to 133.
133 different rebel groups.
Yes.
I used to hear of 37 only.
Among those, they include Ex-FAR, Interahamwe, and the rest of the groups. Some of them opposed to the government in DRC. Some of them use it as a base to destabilize neighbors. So it's a hub of negative forces, and largely there is absence of government.
And some are just militia groups controlled
militia.
by warlords.
Yes, the warlords exploiting minerals and
yeah.
So
with no political agenda.
With no political agenda, but a lot of economic
just
interest.
Control the tribal chiefs
those
and
are
the rest.
the majority, actually.
Yes.
Those are the majority.
Yes. So UN has for long worked on stabilizing DRC, but with a very weak leadership internally in DRC. At the time of fighting and the likes of Professor Wamba Diawamba, I think that's when there were 39 rebel groups with a political agenda within DRC, including Bzima Karaha, Jean-Pierre Bemba, and the rest. So UN tried to support the inter-Congolese dialogue and the stabilization that held for some time, but did not take proper control, especially of the vast Eastern DRC. Then UN, through the UN Security Council, created the first peace enforcement, MONUSCO. MONUSCO was larger, because MONUSCO is 14,000 soldiers on a peacekeeping mission, which they call stabilization. They are just really watching and maybe making reports. I don't think there is anything they are doing. And the viewer says they are engaged in business. One of the reasons MONUSCO mission came to an end was because of the activities that they were engaged in that were outside their mandate, including business, including suspected arms trade, and normally people used to think that they were on a kind of sex tourism venture because they were doing nothing tangible in terms of stabilizing DRC. So really the views of the comments of the viewer are not far-fetched. MONUSCO is in DRC, Eastern DRC, where IDF is best, together with the other militias and groups that total up to 133. So what have they done? And what is their peacekeeping mission? It even limits them. I saw the statement of the spokesperson of the mission saying they will collaborate with UPDF, but they have limited mandate. They can't even fight with them. And indeed that's true, because UN mission deployments are very restrictive. You cannot engage in anything outside your mandate. So maybe they supervise, they patrol, they take reports, and they do make reports, and they are well equipped with the satellite capacity to monitor, but they stop at that basically. So their mandate is limited.
Okay, yes, General.
The nature of UN peacekeeping missions, you also have to understand the psychology of the armies which deploy. I mean, if you find like there is a contingent from Peru or from...
some don't even understand the terrain.
They are in a location.
Yeah.
They have got no relationship with the area they are operating in. Psychologically, this officer or man is not going to lay his life on the line for people in Congo. But when you've got a force which has got direct interest in the stabilization of an area, that's when you'll find armies with officers and men who will lay their lives on the line, because they know what this means. They know the impact it has, for example, the population in their own countries. So UN peacekeeping missions are most times like that. And most times they are peacekeeping missions, they are not peace enforcement. So you're not going to expect that they are going to go run after ADF and attack it in its camps. So they're limited in that. So I would be surprised for people who think that UN could be a solution, UN forces could be a solution to those active groups. Those active groups, like in the particular case where countries have got direct interest, like in our case, in regard to ADF, it is either the DRC army, the moment they build their capabilities to a level where it can go in and engage decisively and eliminate a group like that, or before it builds that kind of capacity, like in this case where it allows UPDF to go in and do that. Then the stabilization of the whole of Eastern Congo, my hope, I don't know whether they are moving in that direction, is to work on the whole region, putting together force, because it will take time for that area to be put under full control, where there is security, and as Congo builds its capabilities to have state presence administratively as well as in the security sense. They have to work on a comprehensive plan as a region, as far as I can see.
Okay, we are left with 5 minutes now. We are going to do 1 minute each, starting with the professor who is on the line from South Sudan. Professor, a way forward on our now presence in DRC, and in 1 minute. Professor?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Your parting shots for this show today, and what's your final take?
No, I think so many things have been said about the deployment and the intervention. I hope that the mission succeeds. It's my prayer, and like any other Ugandan, I would love for the mission to succeed. Let it stay focused on what took it there, and then the troops should come home as soon as possible after completing their mission. This is what I would hope for.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thanks very much. We really appreciate you and for sharing your knowledge, very useful for our country and for the region, for sharing that with us. We really appreciate you. And for you...
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah. Thank you. Sarah, your parting shots.
Well, the UPDF has a legitimate cause to be in DRC. They have the support of the people. We hope that the leadership and the officers involved will take full responsibility to redeem the image of UPDF as well as the image of Uganda when it comes to these deployments. And my call to the leadership is, this country has a constitution. You all take oath to protect and defend the constitution. Let's stop abusing and degrading our constitution.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mapinduzi.
Well, just like Professor and Sarah have put it, my prayers are with the UPDF men and women who are in Congo. We pray for their safety. They have to come back home safe and finish the mission, because it's about protecting Ugandans, and all of us would want that. But that should not take us away from making sure that institutions are not undermined, and you know, constitutionalism has to be upheld. And so the executive, I want to correct, just like somebody said, government, government, government. Let me put it this way, that the executive has a duty to report to Parliament, and Parliament as well as a responsibility to make sure the UPDF is fully supported so they can continue providing that safety. So all in all, we pray for their safety.
Okay.
Yeah, so they can come back home after finishing the mission.
Thank you very much. General, finally.
Yeah, complex as the situation is in Congo, I really would like to urge the commanders of UPDF to remain focused on the mission and to be disciplined, and also to be bold enough where they make mistakes or commit errors to own up, conduct investigations, character rectification measures. And I wish them success on the mission. And to the government, I really like to urge General Museveni and the cabinet, the executive, be humble. What does it cost you? Brief Parliament. Create conditions where the population supports UPDF, where they are on an external mission. These officers and men have got mothers, they have got fathers, they have got children, they have got families. They need to feel proud that the country is behind them. Don't look at things from a narrow way, you know, wanting to show the world that you are in charge and what can anybody do. Be humble. Doesn't cost anything. Bring Parliament on board. And may God bless you all.
Thank you very much, General. And one thing I learned from many of these missions, and when you talk to the soldiers, they tell you that we watch these programs actually. They sit and watch. Many of these soldiers who come from Somalia come back. They even keep saying, Charles, come and visit us and do a show from here. Okay. And extremely humbling. And so for me, I know that many of these guys are watching, and they're our brothers and sisters. So we want to wish them safety. Don't ever think that we wish you bad luck. We really wish you well, and you have gone to represent this country. And again, General has worn a uniform. So, you know, I always tell soldiers that just watch on your left, there is a flag of Uganda. So you are wearing that flag of Uganda on our behalf. So do the mission diligently, and don't fail the country. Don't, you know, mess up, because when you mess up, it's Uganda that is blamed. We wish you good luck, and may you all come back alive and successful. Otherwise, God bless you all. God bless Uganda. Bye-bye and good night.
Everyone deserves more this festive season, which is why MTN Momo is giving you more thank you points on your MTN Momo withdrawals at agent locations. Get 150 thank you points for every 1,000 shillings spent in withdrawal fees. More thank you points means you get more free minutes, more free MBs, more free SMSs, and more free Momo Pay shopping. To use your thank you points, dial *141#.
Everywhere.